Okay, for the front and the back of our ukulele, we're gonna come back to the wood storage room again, come over that same African mahogany, and we need to find a board this time that's a little more wide. It needs to be at least 5.5 inches wide. So if I'm measuring these boards here, this one here, I'm measuring it's just about 5 inches or so. That one's not gonna work. This one here, if I measure it's a little over 7 inches, so that'll work. So just make sure you find a board that's at least 5.5 inches wide. And we're gonna go over to the upcut saw to cut off some lengths that we need from it. If you remember, on the upcut saw, before we cut our lengths, if it has any bad end or rough end like that, we wanna go ahead and just trim off just a little bit. Sometimes the boards have cracks or other things. This one doesn't really look like it has any cracks, but I do wanna cut off that bad end here. So we'll just trim off a little bit first, and then we're gonna cut a length 28 inches long. Tap that pedal. Use the bigger part of our board to push out the little scrap so we don't get our hand inside the saw. We're gonna get a length cut 28 inches long. So we'll type in our 28, get the arm adjusted, and again, be gentle as you slide your board up against that little stop so that you don't slam it too hard. Anything extra you can put back in the wood storage room. Again, go ahead and joint one edge on the jointer. Does not matter which one you choose, just joint one of the edges. Until it's nice and flat. This one looks pretty good in one pass, but if you need another pass, you can do another one. We need to come over to our planer next and clean up the faces of the board. And understand, we just want to get both faces cleaned up, leaving this, as thick as possible. Right now, this board is actually about 1.25 inches on the thickness. And so we're going to just remove 1/16 of an inch at a time. My first setting needs to be 1/16 smaller than how thick that is. So if this is 1.25 inches, I'm going to set this machine to 1 3/16 inches for my first pass. Looking what 3/16 is 0.187. So I'm going to go 1.187. Then we'll flip our board over and send it through at 1 1/8, 1.125, so 1/16 smaller. And go ahead and get the thickness of these down to about 1 inch thick is plenty for what we want to go. So this one we'll have to send a few times. Go to the next one. 1.125. Flip our board over this time. Okay, in order to make the top and the bottom of our ukulele here, we're going to take this board and do that same resaw, same thing that we did when we made the sides. Again, this is splitting the board down the middle, getting two boards out of this. So if I just kind of eyeball a line down the middle, we're going to split this board down this way so we can get two pieces out of it. It's just so we don't have to waste as much lumber when we're trying to build this. We could just get more boards and glue them on here, but resawing it is a great way to use less lumber. Plus it also makes a little, what's called a book match when you put it together, and it looks really nice when it's done. Quick reminders on the resawing. We've done this before, but I want to remind you again. This time, we're just going to get 2 boards out of it instead of 3. And just place your board where it needs to go for just eyeballing the middle. So I'm just looking down over the top and trying to get the blade right in the center. Then I'm going to move my fence and lock it in so it's just basically right in the center. Now, if you're not exactly perfectly on center, that's okay. We want to just be as close as we can on the center. And remember, we only want to take off a little bit at a time, so we're not going to have the blade raised up all the way high and try to do this in one pass. We're going to do multiple passes. And really, I want you to about maybe 1.5 inches for the height of the blade for your first cut. So that first cut is going to go about 1.5 inches high on the board when we cut it. And we're going to flip our board over, keep the same face against the fence, and that's going to get that same 1.5 inches cut from that part of the board. Then we're going to raise the blade up. that'll cut even higher, and then when we flip the board around, it'll eventually get the rest of that board cut all the way down. So we're just doing it in stages. Right now I've got it at 1.5 inches high, and we got to just make sure we keep our board nice and firm so it doesn't tip on us or come away from the fence at all as we do this. Keep that same face against the fence when you flip it. Okay, so now I've got to raise the blade up. And go ahead and raise it up to about how much it can go. Maybe a little bit lower, but pretty close to the highest it'll go. Let's bend that again. Okay, same face against the fence. We're going to flip it. And there we go, we can get 2 pieces out of that same board. It's called a book match, where we open it up just like a book. So after we've done that book match on the table saw, you have to kind of decide how you want this to look. So as you open up that book match, you put those boards together, you can kind of see how that's going to look with the grain wise. Because we could also open it up this way and see if it has a different design that you like with the grain. So either way, just kind of look at what you think is the best option as far as gluing this together. And so it's not a really big deal how you do it, but what we're looking at is just any parts of the grain as it comes together. It's a mirror image of itself. And so just whatever you think looks the neatest or most fancy. And it's a good idea because we're going to have to actually open it up and then glue these 2 boards together. It's a good idea to come back to the jointer and joint those edges just to make sure these boards come together really tight. If there's any gap anywhere, then it won't glue together very well. So I'd leave it put together just like my book match. So don't open it up, leave them together, and you're actually going to run these on the jointer at the same time, the edge that you're going to be opening it up on. So I like that the best, so I'm going to be jointing this edge, both of them together at the same time. That way when they come together, there should be no gap at all. Nice and tight fit when we go to glue this together. We're going to come over to the glue table area to glue these together. Again, we've book matched them, and then I figured out which edges I want to put together, and I've gone to the jointer and I've jointed those edges. So I actually like that design the best as far as placement, so that's what's going to be glued together. On the glue table area, go ahead and grab 3 of the bar clamps. And you're going to space them out. They just fit into these little slots of this glue table. Space them out enough that when you place your boards on here, they'll just kind of rest. And you can just open this up in the order that you want. And we just want to get these 2 edges glued together. We've got a whole bunch of glue bottles over on the side over here. And I like to just tip these up at the same time and get some glue on it. And you want to make sure the glue covers the entire surface here. So get glue on both boards, and then you want to use your glue spreader to spread this around. Fingers, right? So we're just going to spread that glue so it covers the entire edge of those boards. And then we're going to get some pressure on this with the clamps. So spread it around real well. It's okay if you get some glue squeezing out. We just want to have good coverage the entire board as we go to glue this together. So bring those back down, place them how they need to go. And these clamps just kind of slide into place here. And then you're going to want to have the 3rd clamp is going to be on the top. So you have some of your clamps underneath and then another one on top. That's going to help prevent these boards from bowing at all. So make sure that You alternate bottom, top, bottom on these. And just get some pressure on it. If they shift and slide on you or lift up, you can kind of adjust it as you're going. Remember, we're going to be sending this through the planer and getting it a lot thinner eventually, so it's okay if they're not lining up perfect, but get them the best you can. We're just getting some good tight pressure with these clamps. And if I need to adjust the board over here, I can, and then tighten up that pressure. And we want to have pretty good pressure on this. You're going to see some glue squeezing out. You don't need to crank it down so hard that you're crushing the board or anything like that, but definitely get some good, decent pressure that there's no gap at all. And once we've got that in here, if you'd like, we can wipe up some of the wet glue, or we can get a wet paper towel and kind of wipe it up. It's not a problem to leave it because we have a glue scraper that'll scrape this off later after it's dry. But I do want you to get your name on this. And I also would like you to write what time to take the clamps off. And we want to leave this in the clamps for at least 30 minutes. Right now I'm looking at the clock, it's about 3:20. So I'm going to write 3:50 on here. So 30 minutes after right now. So that way the next student, if they need clamps, they don't have to take your clamps off early. They know what time to take the clamps off of. Also, I'd like as many students as possible to use this glue table. So once you get your boards glued up in the clamps, you can actually physically just grab these clamps and take it out of the table and then just set it aside to dry. So you can lean it against a wall, you can set it somewhere out in the floor area as long as it's not in the way of anyone. But we'll let this dry for about 30 minutes at least. All right, I've taken the board out of the clamps. It's been drying in there for at least 30 minutes. And we just need to scrape off any glue that is still sticking on here. If you took time to take a wet paper towel to wipe all that off, you usually don't have to do this, but I just left it because we can take what's called the glue scraper and literally just scrape off the glue pretty easily. So take some time if you haven't already and get that glue off your board. We want to get both faces also because there's some glue on this other side, and so we'll take and scrape off some of that glue. Sometimes it's helpful to clamp your board down to the bench first so you can get both hands on this glue scraper as you're scraping all that glue off. But get all that glue off your board. Okay, once we've got all the glue scraped off, and you don't have to get 100% of it off, just get most of it off. Come over to the planer and we got to get this thickness down. Right now I just measured the board and it was about 3/8 of an inch thick, and similar like when we did our sides, we need to get the thickness of this down to 0.090. So a combination of the planer as well as our wide belt sander, we're going to do this process. We're also going to be using that same carrier board because we've got to get it down really thin. Remember, my planer can only go down to maybe about 1/4 inch at the most. So we're going to kind of trick the planer by using the carrier board so we can put a smaller board through. I'm looking at my chart here. Again, my board right now is 3/8 of an inch, and I need it down to 0.090 for my final thickness. So I'm going to do my first pass actually at 5/16, then 1/4, then 3/16, and then 1/8. And once I get to 1/8 of an inch, then I'm going to jump over to my wide belt sander and finish up the rest of it there. So we're just going to go ahead with the carrier board. Remember, we want to add on 1 inch. So my first pass is going to be at 1.312. So I'm going to come over to type that in here. Program 1.312. Get that adjusted. Board over, the other face. Okay, we've planed it down to 1/8 of an inch, 0.125, using that carrier board. And when we come to the wide belt sander, remember we don't have to use the carrier board anymore. We're just going to run this through our first pass at 0.120, then 110, 100, and then 0.090 is our final pass on here. We'll just start off at 120. Green button, we'll turn it on. Double tap the up arrow. Tap, tap. That will adjust it. Flip it over. Again, double tap that up arrow. It'll adjust it by 1/100 of an inch. It'll go all the way down to 0.090 is our final pass. Remember, we want to use the two smaller red buttons to shut it off. Not hitting the emergency stop, but just these two to shut it off once you get to 0.090. We've got this down to 0.090 for the thickness. The length on this is about 28 inches long, and our width is about 11 inches or so wide. Be careful with this. With it being very thin, it can break or crack on you, so take care of it, be nice and be careful. Out of this one board, we should have enough material to get both the bottom and the top of our ukulele. So I've got some molds here, and this is basically the patterns we're going to be using. One of them is going to be the back, bottom of it, and then also the other is the front or the top. So we got enough to work with on this. I'm going to have you actually just cut this in half. Maybe just go to the upcut saw and just chop this in half. Again, it's 28 inches long, so we're just going to go and chop it at 14 inches so we can deal with one piece for the top and one piece for the bottom of our ukulele here. We'll just go 14 inches, just type that in, and then just upcut saw, we'll just get that chopped right in half. So get one piece for the top, one piece for the bottom. Go ahead and choose which one of these you want to be for your front, which one's for the back. And I've got some patterns here. The front pattern's got a hole in it that we're going to trace for where the sound hole is going to be cut out. And the back pattern is just a solid pattern. On the other side of this, it shows all the bracings we're going to put on later on. Doesn't matter this way or this way when you trace it, but just go ahead and trace our front pattern and our back pattern on, and we're going to try just to line them up as straight with the grain, you know, so it's not crooked or whatever, but do your best to try to get it same way the grain's going, nice straight up and down. Try to get some equal overhang on all sides, and just go ahead and trace it. There's our back, and I'm going to write back on here so I know which one that is. Again, my front, I just want to try to line things up as straight as I can before I go to trace it. Make sure you trace the little circle for your front. We're going to line that up when we go to cut our sound hole out right front. Again, make sure your name is on everything. So we don't lose any of our boards.